I did it for a day. And then I did it the next day, and it wasn't exciting, and it wasn't like some grandiose shaman moment in the middle of an Arizona field in a sweat lodge that got me sober. There's so many things like that with training too. That's such a good analogy, because like you just do all these things and like this isn't exciting, but it's working, and I feel it working, and I feel good. But for so many people, they expect something more, like it to be grander, or for it to hurt more, for it to be good. And I think that's the noise that we hear on our day-to-day lives, that if it's not excruciating or it's not ultimately so exciting, it's not Instagram worthy, then it's not good enough.
Back in the groove.
Back in the saddle again. Happy Monday. Crushing Iron Podcast, episode 272.
We're up to 273.
273. There I am. Not giving us the credit that we're due, but hey, yeah, welcome. It is. It's June 3rd, 2019, and we are already halfway through the year, which is just kind of crazy to me. The year tends to like fly by, and then the summer I feel like it takes forever. Like up until this point, I feel like it just flies by. And then summer, I think mostly because like it's racing season and everything just like kind of tends to like really fly by. But yeah, it's like it's already June. We're here. It seems like 3 months ago people were like, yeah, I'm just kind of hanging out in the off season. And hey, here we are. And we appreciate you joining us today.
Yeah, I gotta agree. It has been moving quick.
It's been moving very quick. And speaking of quick,
run camp was just yesterday.
Yeah, I know. Speaking of quick, have you already gotten in like a 4-hour ride this morning? You heading back from the trace? Is that what you were running late for?
No. Day off.
Yeah.
I'm just moving a little slower today.
I feel like that like gave me like the chills. Day off Monday. But yeah, I know how you do things, so that's okay, because I know it's not planned. It's just planned when you wake up and you see how you feel. So I got no issue with that. Welcome, yeah, Chris.
Well, actually,
you go for it.
Sorry,
it's your show.
I got to be thinking here.
You got to be thinking.
I got to be thinking here.
Oof, we're showing our university skills here.
Yeah. Yesterday, as I was running, I decided to force my day off today a little bit. I don't know if that's I just brought that up because I don't know if that's a good topic or not. I was feeling pretty good. And
let me ask you this. So, because I think it's an interesting, conversation to have. So let me ask you this and be just totally honest. Was it that you physically feel like you were going to need a day off today? Or did you feel yesterday, because I know what run you did, we talked about it last night at dinner, or did you feel like, man, like we did Chattanooga 70.3, I didn't really take that much time, because usually, if this is your first time listening, hey, welcome, Crushing Iron Podcast, this is our third year, every Monday and mostly Thursday, we come to you twice a week, all things triathlon, all things life, training, how to incorporate it, and we just kind of share our wisdom and experience, and hopefully you can apply it to your daily life. But in the past, Mike, a very accomplished and successful age group athlete, and I'm the coach, Robbie, but he has been going at this for 6 years now? You've traditionally been very keen on taking time off, and predetermined time off. In terms of, I think you decide that before you actually feel that it's actually would be required or in your best interest. And that's kind of always how you've gravitated towards the off season and after races. You're like, I think I'm just going to take a little bit of time off. This year's been a little bit different in that you've stayed pretty engaged, consistent, year out. So coming off the heels of a really good race in Chattanooga a few weeks ago, hopping back on the horse much quicker than you normally do. Was it a physical checkout, or was it I know that tomorrow it's probably in my best interest that I'm going to need a mental break, or maybe I don't need one, I just think I really want one? And Mondays are, I think, a great day to take a kind of a mental break sometimes, depending on what your life is like. But so was it a physical need or a mental need, emotional need? Which one was it that kind of pressed you into this will make my decision a little bit easier tomorrow, kind of knowing that in the front.
Yeah, I think it was, we had talked about in Chattanooga how this was like one of the first races I felt like I was in control of. And I kind of got back on it right away afterwards. But the problem was I was having a little issue with my knee. At first, it was just a little sore, so I took a few extra days off from running, but I was still riding and swimming a little bit. And so I guess to answer your question was I had a really solid ride that I felt good about on Saturday. And then yesterday's run, I did it. It was supposedly easy, but I kind of made it a hill repeat kind of thing. And I don't know, I just felt good about it. So I think mostly it was mental because I got a lot of stuff I need to get done. And it's a weird thing for me. And I don't know if you feel this way or if most triathletes feel this way. It's sort of like if I had to rank in order a lot of times the things that I really want to do on said days, a lot of times it comes down to my workout right now. And I was kind of like, well, instead of, because I'm a late day workouter too, and I was just thinking to myself, I'm going to take a day off because, like I said, I got a lot of things that I just want to do, and I want to do an energy day for other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like, work stuff and organizing around the house, because I just feel like things are getting out of control, and I feel like I've been on top of other things so much that I'm just trying to balance it a little bit, and I don't feel...
So are we talking about boundaries here?
Yeah, I think so.
Good. I think it's a great topic for today. We talked about this a little bit at dinner last night, but I think, and I thought about this this last week, but I think self-awareness and self-awareness in general and boundaries for people in general, but then triathletes is something that is like rarely ever talked about. In terms of like, so example, like you have gotten, and so have I over the past few years, like much better at self-awareness. Are we great at it? Are we perfect at it? Not by any stretch of the imagination. But I think you and I both, like, having done this back and forth for the last, for as far as coaching and our friendship the last 6 years and this have become a lot better at kind of recognizing, and again, like, that's the purpose of this podcast, is not to tell you that we're experts in a field or to provide you for a hack or a step 1 through 10 on how to be, this. It's to hopefully share our experiences so you don't have to make the same mistakes and pitfalls that we have over my coaching career, your athletic career. But so I think that, while we're not perfect, we've done a lot better job of kind of seeing the, what most people would say, like the quote unquote warning signs before we get kind of too far into it, and the burnout per se, or the or overtraining or over fatigued or finding, so I think, what you were showing there is like a general sense of really good self-awareness in that, hey, I know my tendencies, I know how I usually trend, and I think I can turn this into a positive by getting ahead of it versus making it more of a reactionary kind of negative once it creeps up on me and is actually staring me in the face,
mm-hmm.
And I have no choice, and I think, from a commitment and a boundaries and kind of self-awareness standpoint, I think that is one of those conversations that athletes never have with themselves before they commit to something as substantial and demanding and as consuming as triathlon can be in general. And then especially when they come to long course racing and they get swept up, it's kind of like the mental and emotional version of what they proceed to give themselves as a physical time. Oh, I'm going to sign up for this race a year in advance and I'm going to do 13:20 in my race. Like they have no idea where they got it. They're just like, that kind of sounds about right. With absolutely nothing to back that up. That's objective. And then obviously in addition, understanding that, if you had to go backwards and think, I could have predicted the last 3 months, you couldn't have predicted any of it, but to try to predict 12 months forward. But in terms of like boundaries and the personal emotional investment that is required, I really don't think a lot or enough, I guess is probably better, enough athletes, because I know that I work with some and I've had conversations with some and even like through emails from our podcast listeners, is when you commit to something, especially if it's your first or you already struggle with, because here's the thing, a lot of people don't necessarily struggle with having available hours to train. They just frankly struggle with really poor time management. And then you add in a race that's going to need to require a specific amount of training. You have to make this decision, this conscious decision, to say, all right, look, do I have this? Not just do I have this kind of time to train, but do I have the time management skills to carve out time that's necessary to be successful? Do I have boundaries set in my life to where I know and I'm willing to give up certain aspects of my life? And I acknowledge that I'm going to have to either cut back on family time, if you have a family, or personal time with friends and social things, work, getting up early or staying up late or going to do something on lunch. Am I willing to do that? And if I'm willing to do that, then I need to be willing to accept not the consequences, but the differences in how my life is going to be shaped. But it's also okay looking in the mirror and say, you know what, I don't know that I'm really necessarily ready for that. Like, I'm not ready to give up this, or in turn, in a self-awareness standpoint, I also recognize within me that I have a hard time saying no to people. And so I'm always going to say yes, and so I'm going to be so stretched then that while I have these goals and I can consume and I have a lot of time, the X amount of time that I'm given per week, if you break it up in like a pie chart, is going to be scattered into like 18 different segments. But if I had really good boundaries and I knew what I was doing with the purpose, and I was dedicated toward this craft, or which is training and triathlon or whatever distance it is, then maybe that pie chart's now split up into like 3 categories: family, work, training. No specific order. Hopefully, if you're going about this the right way, it's family always first, and then everything else follows after. But a lot of athletes don't have that they don't look at themselves. They look at, like, we talk about, courses for different horses in some of our podcasts, in terms of like what kind of athlete you are and what kind of abilities you have that are best suited for specific courses. But what athletes also don't take into consideration a lot is, when it comes to the distance and the time and the commitment, how they do personally with setting boundaries, and how are they ready to commit to something that's going to take away this. And if it's not, then they need to be prepared to go through that going down the road. And I think that's always a great topic, and it's something that we could kind of always dial in, or always have a good refresher in terms of, where am I at emotionally and physically? Why am I here? Am I going in the right direction? If I'm not, what can I do to better set myself up for success? Or do I just need to be more self-aware in the future, so I don't pick 7 races of this distance, knowing that I just don't have the mental and emotional capacity to differentiate and use time management better, knowing that I just don't want to give up X amount of time.
Mm-hmm. As you're saying that, I was also thinking that I think one of the reasons I'm taking the day off too is this stress idea. Mm-hmm. And we talk about stress a lot and how that affects you. And, you talk about if you're training with heart rate, and how that can sometimes be a false indicator in a way, based if you're going to specifically think about your training, because you could go out one day and have so many different stressful things on your mind that are affecting your heart rate, and it doesn't really give you an accurate representation of your fitness, maybe. Mm-hmm. I might have just sort of made that up, but I feel like that's kind of part of it. But so yeah, I'm like, all right, well, I feel pretty confident and comfortable with where I'm at in my training, and I'm not a super distance guy, as you have known. I just really feel like over the last 6 months or so, I've really zoned in on the consistency angle of it, and that gives me tremendous confidence, versus like needing to go out and run 20 some miles or whatever like that. I feel like I'm on a path right now where if I can just keep doing what I'm doing, and inching it up and finding small gains and everything, that's really what I'm looking at. And I'm not worried about a day off, mm-hmm. or something like that. It's like, especially if I can get the other things off my mind, keep that off my plate, and because that always affects your training. That's the thing you hear about all the time. Is like, I got so much going on, and training's really, and then you lose your, zeal for it. It's like I don't have any. I don't have the mojo anymore. So that's kind of what I'm protecting, and I think it's just because I want to, like I said, clear the deck, clear my brain on other areas, and make sure that everything continues to move in the right direction versus actually solving a major problem every day.
It's such a positive and refreshing way to look at things, because I was just we haven't really had this as a conversation with a specific athlete, but I know this athlete very well. We've been working together for 2 years, and but the analogy I want to make here is that physically, the thought and feeling that most athletes have is that I can't take a break because I'm going to lose everything.
Mm-hmm.
I just had a race. I don't want to take a week off. I'm going to lose it all. Like they think 6 to 8 months of work is going to just like all of a sudden go down the drain. And then, they try to get back into like, oh yeah, maybe I need to recover. Because, as, Steve Magnus and Brad Stolberg's book really kind of coined their own little phrase of, stress plus, rest equals growth. And, the thing that athletes, really, really fear from a physical and a fitness standpoint is, hey, I can't take a break because if I do, I'm going to lose it all. Whereas what their thought process should be is, if I don't take a break, I'm going to lose it all. And that's going to be expressed physically in overtraining, stagnation, getting stale, over-fatigued, sick, injured, burnt out. Physically, emotionally, it's also fending off that the amount of mental and emotional focus and investment it takes with your energy to be quote unquote engaged or totally bought in. And that is something that I think really, really needs to be thought about. And it sounds like to me like that's exactly what you are referring to, is you're being proactive in trying to prevent the burnout physically, mentally, and emotionally. And that I think that rest is something that athletes really fear, because they again, when we talk about boundaries, don't have boundaries set as terms of being okay with their downtime. Because if they don't have triathlon, then what are they going to do? And if they're not doing it, then this fear consumes them of, I'm losing it all. And so I think having that balance and that understanding is so huge. And it sounds like you've got a really good, at the moment, grasp on, doing your work in terms of prevention to make sure it doesn't all come cascading down in a week or 2 weeks.
That's a good point, man. I think that might be it. I've been reading. Have you ever heard of this guy named Gabor Mate?
Excuse me?
Exactly.
Does that sound like something a drunk Australian would say?
Yeah, I think he's Canadian. He's like an addiction author, but he like deals with addicts and things like that. And in Vancouver, like he wrote a book called The Realm of Hungry Ghosts, and it's about his life in the ghetto of Vancouver, dealing with lifetime addicts that are living in like the building he works in. And they're a little more proactive, I think, with their treatment of addicts, where they're kind of giving them housing and shots and things like that, or whatever they need. They actually give them their drugs or whatever. But like one of the things he was talking about, he writes a lot about adult ADD too, and basically how so many people are just continually distracted, and they're never in the moment, and that becomes sort of their nemesis, because they're always somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And how they can't do different tasks. And I've been kind of like interested in that from my personal perspective, is sometimes I just get like, there's so much going on in life, and you can't focus a lot. It's really hard to focus sometimes these days, it seems like. And a lot of it is childhood issues. I think he likes to argue, but I think more and more with like the just the ability for us to do almost anything we want these days. Whether it
Right.
be I could start designing whatever, and then you just got to go watch some videos, and then the next thing you know, you can kind of do it. And I have that problem where, whether it be training or life or business or whatever, sometimes it's easy for me to think, well, this is good, but this gives me another idea. And then you go down that other road. So I'm really trying to pull back into, instead of always having a mountain of activity potentially waiting for me, I'm trying to simplify that. And by staying on top of training, I think that has kind of like helped me say, okay, you've got that area kind of good. Now let's move over here and bite off just a little bit, and as much as we can chew, and then start forming that same habit. So we always talk about how triathlon can be a metaphor for life. I guess I'm trying to use it finally in a way where I'm like stepping back from it and saying, hey, all right, you can be consistent. You can do these things. You can sort of get a handle on this.
Mm.
And now how do you kind of parlay that into different areas of your life? Because that's really the thing, how it's like, this triathlon, I always say, kind of changed my life. And it sort of did from a health and fitness perspective, and gave me abilities to do certain amazing things physically. But now, how does that really relate to what's going on in my daily life? And it's always popping its head in there, and I've heard many, many stories about how triathlon has changed people's life and everything like that. But I guess it's more about crystallizing it and getting it to a point where, yeah, okay, I can really identify with how running consistently for 6 months can mean I can do this consistently for 6 months, and how that will pay off.
It's the same expression that it's always been, right? I mean, we always talk about triathlon as a way to express ourselves, but in training and triathlon is also oftentimes an expression of where we are currently with life, how we're dealing with it. Because, I mean, I have yet to really like encounter an athlete whose life and training don't systematically reflect each other, in terms of when they're really, really consistent with training, life is going really, really well, or they're on top of things, their mood is better, their health is better, they're more focused, everything's getting done. Versus the other end is, I never have nothing. It's like, oh, my life is total chaos. Things are terrible. But don't you worry. I'm getting in every single workout and my week is green. That's just, it's always a reflection one way or the other. And I think the most proactive way to go about it, and I feel like is what you're kind of trying to communicate, or what I'm hearing, is that, like that is, triathlon is an expression, but it's also a reflection of life and how we are doing personally, and how we're adapting and handling certain aspects of our life, or not handling certain aspects of our life. Are we making ourselves a priority? Are we making time for ourselves? Are we taking our emotional and mental frustrations out via training, and that's affecting it that way? It's just so interconnected. And while triathlon, and I think just endurance sports in general, are just I think they offer such a great opportunity for expression and recovery and healing in a lot of different ways. I think it can also be incredibly insightful in terms of how that is going and how we're approaching workouts or not approaching workouts or sessions or our week. And if we turn around and look at it and back into the tunnel that is our life and our day-to-day, we can find areas of our life to improve on that we need to address. Like if we look back on the times in our life where maybe like right now you're not training the way you want to, or you feel like you should, or you have in the past, don't just look back and look at, all right, what was I doing training-wise, and why isn't it working now? A lot of times it's because, remember, the person who does the training is in charge, not the training. And so a great way to do is look back and think, all right, well, what was working back then? And Was it the training? Sure. But again, what was your life like, and what were you doing then? What were the steps you were taking? What was your diet like? What was your sleep like? The job. So if there are differences, then there need to be differences now. And I just think, triathlon and endurance sports in general, while it's an opportunity to go out and express ourselves and what we're doing, it's also a great place to look in the mirror and have our training look back at us and say, all right, where can we do better and be better in terms of the emotional and mental aspects of our life that lead to these physical expressions on race day or on some of these training days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's I look at things differently when I think about triathlon and the training we do. And, when I'm just talking to like a buddy of mine who's a coach back home, I think about, approaching sports differently. And it's really kind of a cool perspective because I think about a lot if I would have known what I know now. And of course, that's what everybody always says. But like when I was back training in team sports and things like that, how my approach would have been a lot different. And you have to understand that, it really teaches you sort of a workman-like mentality if you let it.
Mm-hmm.
And that cannot be understated, I think. And I think that's what I'm also saying, too, is that, like, when it comes down to other things in life, it's just sort of like, you can't all of a sudden decide to do an Ironman and 1 month later be ready for it. You have to give it time. You have to be patient with it. You have to just do it within your boundaries. Mm-hmm. And within your limits, and do the right things in progression, and eventually, things will be going the right way. But it's like, that workman-like thing really kind of hits home. Just for example, yesterday on that run, I was just sort of like, normally it's like you go out for an hour run or whatever, and I've never been the person that's been sort of like, I got to hit the hour. I just go out and do my thing, and if I come back in, few minutes short or whatever, it doesn't bother me. I think a lot of people that sort of does maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But yesterday I was coming back and I knew that if I would have gone straight back the way I came, I was going to be about 5 minutes short. And then I knew if I turned left and went a different way, I was probably going to be about 3 minutes over. And I was just in such a, controlled groove that I just decided, well, I'm going to go the other way. I feel good. I'm just going to throw it on. So I ended up running 3 minutes over. It's a little thing, right? It's like 8 minute difference. But I felt like it's this control factor over what you're doing and not feeling like it's something you just have to get in, something you have to jam in and figure out how to get done any way you can. It's more of a like, and it's sort of like being in a moment, really. And it's kind of like that Zen thing that I always talk about. I feel like sometimes I really feel that, and believe me, it's really powerful and it's hard to explain sometimes, but when you can get in that spot where you're just there and that's all you're
mm-hmm.
thinking about. You're not thinking about, oh man, halfway through your run, as soon as I get back, I got to do this. If you can really let go and be there for what you're doing, it's so much more productive.
It's kind of interesting you say that because I was reading an article earlier today about learning and performance. And it was saying, like, in terms of teaching, teachers, it's really, really hard teachers will really never know if someone has truly learned something until years later when they realize they haven't forgotten it.
Mm.
Because if you're being taught something, in class or in a room, you're being taught something specifically for that moment, for that week, for that semester. But years later, you're only going to really understand what you really intrinsically learned and absorbed by what you haven't forgotten. And, performance and training is very, very much the same way. Everyone, thinks that every day is a make it or break it. Mm-hmm. Today I'm going to learn everything there I need to know about myself. I'll work with an athlete for 1 week and they're like, Coach, what do you see? What's the data telling you about me? I'm like, first off, let's just calm down for a second. Data is important, but it's also like one of the most overrated aspects in triathlon. And companies keep on making extra items and data to absorb, not because it's relevant or it has to, but it's because people like to consume it. It's a product. And I'm like, sorry, like I don't want to burst your bubble, but it's going to take weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. Like what you did this week really only tells me one thing. You did this week. And it's about what you do next week. Because if you don't do anything next week, then what will we learn? Nothing. We only learned that you did nothing this week. And then, so basically what you did the previous week, maybe we didn't get that much from it. But athletes live in a world, and we live in a world now, like you said, it's like you can do basically everything you want to all the time via some kind of app or control or connection. In athletes, and I think we've now like started to wire ourselves as humans as like it not only has to be done right now, but we have to get an answer right now to validate the time I just spent doing this. And that is the biggest, not issue, but that is one of the biggest obstacles that a lot of athletes have trouble overcoming, is that long-term vision and that long-term process of you have no idea where you're going to end up. And we're not going to really learn what's really, really working for a good substantial period of time. Because, like you getting trained by a week or even 2 weeks, and the coach be like, oh yeah, I've learned everything I need to know about you. This is how we're going to do X, Y, and Z, is like saying you can meet somebody in 2 weeks and know you're going to spend the rest of your life with them and you have no questions asked, you're never going to have a fight, and everything's going to go perfectly. And it's going to work that way. But the thing that people again struggle with on a normal day-to-day training thing is like, what I learned today was that I did the work, and the mentality and the mental and emotional investment that I made and the focus that I had was good, and it led me to do this workout. And this workout again is going to allow me to in the future be able to do X, Y, and Z. We just don't know what X, Y, and Z is going to be. But we want to trend that direction through repetition, through consistency, through commitment, through dedication, through manipulating the training up and down so we can absorb it. But in terms of getting that innate immediate feedback and validation, so many of us are now wired to do. It brings us to make decisions of, and this is we talk in training when people go out and want to try and PR training and have like injuries and burning themselves in the ground and wonder why they can't get any better because they refuse to run, slower more often, is the same thing in race we talk about when people want to go and blow up on the bike, is they aren't capable, or they aren't capable because most people haven't shown that they can do that, is they haven't proven to themselves the ability of restraint and acceptance and ultimate confidence that what I'm doing now is going to yield a great or wonderful fitness harvest down the road. Like no one wants to plant seeds anymore. They want to go and buy a full-grown tree. And training is, while it might not just be a seed, depending on where it is planting it. It's planting a seed or a very small plant, and then doing the best you can every day to watch it grow. And then if things start to blossom, you don't clip it real quick and put it in a vase. You let it continue to grow. You let it continue to flourish. You tend to allow it to do what it's supposed to, which is continuously grow without you putting a limitation on it. And so many times we put limitations on ourselves, or we strangle the life out of our future performance by burnout. Like it was funny, like I had this vision earlier today. There's that like picture of people, and it's all about giving up. And it's like that, like alien troll hobbit looking creature with like a pickaxe, and he turns around and quits like an inch or two before he has this like, huge breakthrough. The picture I'm talking about?
Oh, the tunnel thing?
Yeah, the tunnel thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I was having this like, and what got me to think about that was that's a physical, expression of like working hard and trying to get to where you want to go and people giving up early. But what oftentimes also happens is it might not just be the physical grind. It might be the mental and emotional grind that tells you to turn around and stop. And so many times, like with training, we beat ourselves into submission by strangling our performance that could happen in the future by what we have to have right now. And the ability to not see into the future, but know that what we're doing right now, while it may not seem to us as an athlete or as a person or whatever, is yielding some huge gain, that if we repeat these things over and over and over and over and over again by doing these simple steps that might seem monotonous and not grandiose, one day you might wake up and think, oh my God, look how far I've come. Like, if you're able to see incremental gains slowly over time, you're doing it correctly. And if you have and you're going to have breakout events and breakout sessions, and as long as you're trending the right way, you're on the right track. It's when athletes are trending a right way, and then that trend now becomes insufficient for them. It's the trend is the graph isn't as aggressive as they would like. We no longer accept a positive fitness trend. We now expect a huge jump in the graph, and so now we want to basically change everything that we've done that have gotten us to where we want to go to chase an extra blip on the trend, when that might end up in failure. And it's everything we do. I think now, like with training in life, I think is so we lose sight of those small gains in terms of not the gains you see, but the gains you're creating that you cannot visually touch yet. And that is one of the most difficult things with triathlon and endurance sports in general, is that development takes time, and you can't rush it. And if you try to rush it, it's not going to work out very well for you. Or it may seem like it might work out in 2 seconds. The first minute you do it, the first week you might do it, and then a few weeks and months down the road, you're going to understand and realize that you made a wrong turn that led you right back to where you are. And if you had just stayed on the same course, albeit maybe boring, albeit not be as exciting as you want it to be, would have gotten you 500 miles further down the road to where you were trying to go.
Yeah, man, I love that article that you mentioned about learning. It's, the thing about, I feel like when we get older, I feel like it's harder to learn as you get older. I mean, I think that's probably scientifically proven too, that your brain is more susceptible to learning when you're younger. And when you couple that with, like we were talking about, all the things that are out there at our disposal, and the things that we can quote unquote learn, it's like, how many times have people been like, I'm really I want to do some painting or whatever, and then they go and watch a YouTube video, and then they go get a bunch of paint, and then they start painting, and they're like, look at me, I'm painting. And then they follow this guide or whatever, and they paint a painting. Someone showed them how to paint, and then it's like, wow, I'm a painter. And then after that's over, that initial thrill, one, is gone probably, and two, now you have to face the idea that you really don't know how to paint, but you have to create more paintings if you're going to be a painter. Like, you don't truly understand. You have learned something about painting, but you don't understand it. And I think that, that's the same thing that happens in triathlon all the time. It's like, oh, I got a new power meter, I'm going to go out and blah, blah, blah. And then the first week, you're like, man, all these things have just popped into my head. And now I learn it, you feel like you're understanding and learning stuff. And then you kind of don't really keep that same intensity with it, or whatever. It sort of drifts away, or you have a new kid or something that seems faster, or wheels or whatever. And then you realize that you haven't really kind of learned the foundational part of it again. And I say this because, I'm just starting to talk this way. I've been in and out of this, and I'm talking about what I'm feeling right now. But like you said, man, I've been doing this for 6 years. And I think part of the problem is that if I would have had a different approach, that may have changed things and made them happen quicker. But it doesn't mean they're going to happen overnight. And especially if you don't come from any of these sports.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have that, because, you learned and have a full, deep understanding of swimming from your youth. I mean, that kind of thing is like untouchable. I mean, for someone else to try to learn to the level that you understand swimming is very, very difficult, especially as an adult.
Yeah.
I mean, we have so many things going on in our mind, and we're going to pick up a book and learn how to do something, and you read it, and you're like, man, that's really, I get it. And then like a week later, you forgot everything in that book. It's gone. Because you didn't spend a lot of time with it. You didn't spend, I mean, really, if you want, it's almost like taking a course. If you're going to do that, and you got to go through it slowly, really understand one section before you move on to the next. I think as far as learning goes, it's probably the best way to do it, rather than try to be like, so, like camp is a good example, and you brought this up many times at swim camp. It's like there's a lot here. 50s and 25s are your best friends. So pick one of these things that you learned here and go through the 25s and go through the 50s, maybe 5 or 10 at a time, and practice one thing until you get it down, and then do more and pull in.
No, Mike, we want it all.
Right. I mean, and that's where I think that, that adult ADD kind of thing gets in there. It's like, wait, I'm supposed to be doing this. I'm doing this. I got to get this involved. I got to get my arms wide. I got to get, keep my elbow this. And, we start doing all that stuff. And it's like, I always go back to my drum. When I started drumming, they always tell you to just work on one thing super slow until you own it.
Yep.
And then move on. And then, because I didn't do that really, I sort of did, but I become a hack-ass drummer because I didn't.
Hack-ass drummer.
It's true. Because I tried to rush I wanted to be playing drum solos. That's the thing in life, is you always want to be on stage doing with the lights on you, doing the solo like perfectly, but you forgot all the steps along the way that make that look easy for people.
Well, it's because now so many things are available that we're obsessed with just doing. We don't want to really perform and be able to do these things really, really well. We just want to get it done. It's like you get something in the mail that you got to put together, a huge package or wife order from Amazon. You need to build it. Especially for us guys, what's the first thing you think about? I don't really need the instructions. I just want to get it done.
100%.
Because there is something like, this might be a dude thing, but I know some women like this, that like following the steps, no thank you. I just want to get it done.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to, excuse me, I don't want to do it correctly. I just want to complete it. And swimming is such a great example of that. And even sometimes, training, it's like it takes extra brain power for athletes to to accept, is that they love getting coached now because they get structure, because they don't have to think now about what to do. Now they can just complete it, because if you think about it, it takes so much extra brain power to both do something and also follow the instructions if you're creating them on your own down the line. Because most of us want to take the shortcut, like, I just want to do it, I'll just put it together, and if these two nails don't fit, then you know what, that's probably fine. If it came from IKEA, that's probably standard. But you get the picture. It's like I just want to go swim because I don't want to have to think. Because either I don't know, or I just want to get it quote unquote done. And by taking that approach that's just not specific and like has no purpose, no wonder you haven't been engaged in what you're doing and seeing results. And then you just lead yourself right back in that circle of, now I don't want to go back to the pool. Now I don't really want to do it. And I'm just going to go swim. Like going to go swim isn't going to get better at swimming and having a purpose behind it that's specific to getting better at these specific elements of your swim or what's required to perform the way you want to perform on race day. You just go swim because it is so technical. But it's just like we're just obsessed now with just getting it done and not paying attention. And that's when you find, like, even further down the road, like when you find what really separates the quote unquote doers from the achievers and achieving their total ultimate performance, are those small specific details that the doers find too monotonous or too mentally taxing that they just don't want to do them. And they say that by, I just don't really care. That's the I saw a quote, I think it was the other day, it was something about like perfectionism is another form of is a more like grandiose term for procrastination. You're not really a perfectionist, you just don't want to complete it. But in terms of people and performance, what really separates people and individuals from their performance or a future performance that there could be are the finest, smallest details that they tell themselves they don't care about, because it just relieves them of the obligation or the need to learn and figure out how to do things that might actually get them over the hump. They would rather just go on naively believing that they can do things, this way, and they'll end up being okay. But being uncomfortable and learning another specific way, it's just too much to them. So they tell, I just don't really care. I'm not really that kind of guy. But if you really want to be the no stone left unturned person, then you have to be able to go that direction. But most people aren't, and do that much. But again, most people aren't willing to go that deep in order to figure things out, and maybe even feel stupid for a moment until they can figure it out. And then that's when they can actually end up, maximizing their total full potential, if they just have the awareness and the willingness to address all areas of it, not just one.
Mm-hmm. I think that most people have willingness. I think what happens is, when you read about Zen, they always talk about this too, that like one of the most uncomfortable places that you can put yourself in is a position of being confused. And when you overload yourself with too many things, that creates confusion, which creates uncomfortability, and it creates you don't understand what's going on. And when you don't understand or you can't see things clearly as they are, then the odds of you doing them are less. Mm-hmm. And I just, back to that swim analogy, if you try to incorporate 15 new things into your swim stroke that's not working for you, it's just going to be a load of shit, man. You're going to be so confused, and then it's not going to be enjoyable. It's almost like, you had an analogy, I forgot exactly what it was, but it was like, it's like building a skyscraper. If you don't, if you just want to get that, you got to, before you build that, you got to dig way down, right? You got to go down and deep. So the deeper the hole, the taller the building is always the thing, right? So, but most people just want to, I'm sick of going down, man. I want to go up. Yep. I want to go up. I want to go up. And that's really hard to do, but it's like sets the foundation for everything. If you want to learn something, if you want swimming or learn something about your body in cycling or running or whatever, you got to take it slow, man. If you're going to make changes and if you want to like build that foundation that's going to matter in the long haul, because
nobody can see the foundation, Mike. I have something for people to see, not just for people to see. I have to see it today.
Right. Yeah. But it's like the video thing I was talking about with the painting. Sometimes we can, as humans, your mind and your body can do remarkable things within a week, but the ability to sustain that is like almost impossible if you just completely, fire something off and you want it's like, it's like, oh, I got this new cycling technique. I went out just today and rode, 8,000 feet. And it was unbelievable. And then you're wrecked for like, you know what I mean? Or whatever. It's like you have ability to do certain things, but that isn't necessarily going to work in the long run. It's like building that skyscraper on a shallow ground. It's like it may stay up there for a week or two, but eventually it's going to fall.
Mm-hmm. And fall it will.
Yeah.
And fall it will be huge. The shortcut you took won't even become close to being worth it. And that's what we do. We do things and we take shortcuts just to get it done. But then we always have to come back and do it all over again. And the amount of time and energy you've then wasted is tremendous. Versus if you had just stayed on path and not made a poor decision or tried to, quote unquote, jump ahead, which is again like we talked about this in the kind of the last 2 weeks podcasts have been, you should determine progress and map out progress by looking backwards, not forwards. But looking backwards for most athletes just shows them where they really truly are, not where they should probably go. And because that's not exciting based on reality, because the reality isn't exciting. That's why, we talked about why it's so difficult to follow training plans, because 1 week it might be, an hour and a half run, and the next week it's an hour and 45-minute run. But what if I miss the hour and a half run? Now what do I do? Are you really ready for an hour and 45-minute run? Probably not. Probably not to be safe and do it. But now you're kind of left to do it. But we don't want to look back and make the adjustments like, you know what, I should probably just stick to an hour and a half. Or let's say I did an hour and a half run and it was a struggle. And it says I should move up the next week to an hour and 45. Should I really move up? Probably not. Probably should do it again. Because continuous, I think that's the thing that I think most people will just fail to understand sometimes when they do things repeatedly is just because if you're always trying to adapt, then you're never recovering to where you can really do it well one time. You're just responding and never doing something so your body becomes really good at it so we can do it even better the next time. Your body just stays in survival mode, which is like that 2.5, 3 hour, 3.5 hour runs. And I'm I honestly don't know what you're practicing besides just perfecting covering a distance at the same speed, and then having to recover for a long time. But you don't want to. But athletes, again, when they look back at training plans, especially when they go by mileage, they're 8, 10, 12. Let's say they had a poor 8-mile run and they didn't feel good, and then they had to go out of town and miss a 10-mile run. Well, now where the hell are you? Now what do I do? Well, it says I'm supposed to do the 12 because I'm supposed to be ready for race day. Well, you weren't ready for the 8-miler, so what makes you think you're ready for the 12?
Save that for race day.
Yeah, in order to, but no one thinks about that in terms of logical progression. And I had this conversation with an athlete yesterday in terms of we were just going back and forth about a few specific things, and I said, that'll that is the way I coach is a lot different from a lot of the way some, at least coaches that I've found or that I've heard about or athletes have come from, is that when I start working with an athlete, I am immediately invested in the relationship, them as a person and them as a total whole athlete over time. I do, some athletes hey, I've got 3 or 4 months out from this race. I need some help. Okay, happy to help, but I'm not getting in this coach-athlete partnership, relationship, whatever you want to call it, for your race. You might be in it for this, but I'm not. And I'm not going to coach you haphazardly and irresponsibly. Let's say athlete A has a race in 90 days, and they haven't done a lot of training, and they're quote unquote lost. It's a very common thing. I get emails of people 60 days, 90 days out, and they're like, Coach, I just now figured out I'm just kind of lost, and I don't know what I'm doing, and I've been missing a lot of work. Can you help me? And a lot of times, the conversation is not probably the way they want it to go, and why I turn athletes away sometimes, or we don't end up working out before we get started, is that I'm listen, I get it that you're in a pinch. I get it that you're in a bind, but this isn't cramming for an exam. It's not cramming mentally for an exam where you might momentarily know something in the cliff notes and feel like you've read it, but you haven't learned it and you can't apply it. It's also not a risk to you physically. So while your longest ride might be 2.5 hours, I'm not going to give you 4 hours next week. Sorry. Because I'm not training your race calendar. I'm working on developing you, and so it's a rub sometimes with athletes, and I think with people who want coaching or who like to self-coach because they like to be in control, or coaching just not in the cards to them, is that it's so it's so hard because the race is our immediate due, right? It's our immediate justification. It's our immediate excitement. It's what has to be done now that I can feel something from. Like the long-term thing, it's just not really exciting. Like for a lot of people, I'd rather, just kind of like, take a crash course in 2 weeks than I would really work hard at a craft and be able to do some pretty special things. Like I'd rather buy something from IKEA and put it together now and call myself a carpenter versus going to carpentry shop and do all these kind of things where you actually become one. And so when I have this conversation, I'm like, I get it, but they're like, well, I haven't done this. I'm like, I'm not responsible for what you haven't done. I'm only responsible for putting you in a place to do what you just did and have shown you can do in a better place to do it this next week. And that is one of the most difficult things for athletes to really, really accept and understand and kind of just frankly just get over, in that coaches can't motivate athletes. They can allow them opportunities to express that depending on their level of commitment and their motivation and their ability to execute. But it's not it shouldn't be, I don't think, coaches' jobs to overextend athletes to force them into a race distance or a preparation that's not a reflection of the work they've actually done. And that's what you should be looking at. But that's also not very exciting, because I think when athletes sometimes ask to get coaching or they reach out and they expect you to like slam them with like a 20-hour week, because you got to play catch up. Mm-hmm. And what oftentimes is they're kind of like, oh, that's it. Like, that's all I'm going to get. And like, I have I've got Ironman, United States in 4 months. I'm like, I know, but last week, in the last couple weeks, you were only able to do this. So, well, I guess I'm the one missing something. And so, so if you dwindle that down into more like a day-to-day thing, it's doing the best. And that's the thing, is like, you can't do great things in the future. Do great things today. And that's. You get consumed by just the doing it because you want it to be done, not if I just cultivate it and work on it bit by bit, piece by piece, what it actually might end up becoming. Like that was one of the very, very, I use this analogy a lot, but it was one of the very, very, very first things I learned about when I got sober was none of this is hard. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, there's a lot of difficult things you need to do to get sober, but then to stay sober, like, it's not easy, but it is not impossible. And to be quite frankly, it's not really hard if you do all the little things that they tell you to do when they tell you to do them, and you practice specific things, and you do all these things that just don't seem like, wait, this isn't going to work. Like, how in the world, like, doing this, how is this going to allow me to be sober, and how is this going to keep me this way, and what's this is going to teach me about myself and about my disease? This is it. Almost, it's the thing is, and the reason it doesn't work is because for some athletes for some people in recovery is that it's not exciting enough. It's not like Passages Malibu, where you got steak dinners and oceans and sunshine and, fitness centers and like these crazy, hacks. It's just like, it seems like too simple. You follow these steps, you do them, you try to do them right, and then you wake up tomorrow and you try to do them again. But it's like putting off to some people. But if you do them and you work hard and you're diligent with them, because like one of the phrases we talk about in recovery is like, it only works if you work it. And if you work it, then you might wake up and then one day, like me, you might be, 5.5 years sober. But doing it, but I didn't just become it. I did it for a day. and then I did it the next day, and it wasn't exciting, and it wasn't like some grandiose like shaman moment in the middle of an Arizona field in a sweat lodge that got me sober. It got me to this place. It was just like doing the same thing every day. But you end up in like I can't imagine. I just don't understand it. Like it's I don't understand how I got here. But there's so many things like that with training too, that's such a good analogy, because like you just do all these things and like this isn't exciting, but it's working, and I feel it working, and I feel good. But for so many people, they expect something more, like it to be grander, or for it to hurt more, for it to be good. And I think that's the misinformation and the noise that we hear on our day-to-day lives, that if it's not excruciating or it's not ultimately so exciting, it's not Instagram worthy, then it's not good enough. But most oftentimes the things that are the best things for you are the things that are neither excruciatingly painful or awful or hard, or the ones that are, super exciting, happiness, never going to happen again things. It's the small things you do each day that add up, that end up becoming a routine, end up becoming something that you're really, really good at, because that's how you make a habit. That's how you create a culture of consistency, and that's how you're able to complete and do things you never thought you'd be able to do, because you just woke up one day and you were. Not, I tried to be this today and now I don't have to worry about it again. It's construction of self. It's not buying a version of that.
And in that analogy, you worked real hard at the foundational elements in the beginning too.
It was awful.
Yeah.
It wasn't. Like we've been best friends through all that, and I have the therapist I still go see. He's like 20 years sober. I know so many people that have insane, years of sobriety, like 20, 30, 40 years. And it blows my mind. And when I talk to them, they're like, yeah, but like in order to do that, you just kind of got to do the same thing you've been doing. But you don't see that. Mm-hmm. It's not as exciting. You're like, whoa, wait a minute. You mean I just got to keep doing the same thing? Like, because that bores some people into understanding and getting fooled that there is this special thing. Or in triathlon, there is this piece of equipment or this special method that's going to change it all. Mm-hmm. And we get fooled into that. And then that's when we leave our ideals. And for me, yeah, I did a ton of really hard work. And when I was in treatment, like we had limited phone, like dial up, like a rotary phone, like twice a week that you get permission to use. We had no TV, we had no cell phones, we had no internet, we had nothing. I was there for 3 months, and you were forced to do. There was no fitness centers, and it was in like the dead cold of winter, and you were forced to just really, really, really work hard on yourself. But that's when I was able to, thankfully, like work really hard and work through some things I needed to do, so I was set up for success. And then it was just, you have to continue to do those things, because if you don't and you get lazy with them, then what happens is you end up tricking yourself into thinking that you don't have a disease and that you can have one drink, because you've forgotten all the other things to do, all the small things, like, in terms of training, like, like you got to a point to where you're really successful in training, going, like, what, I can probably go out and kill the track today. Mm-hmm. Like, wait a minute, that's not how I got here. Then again, there's time and a place for speed stuff. Is like when they go, I'm like, what? I think I can bust out 2.5 hours hard run today. And then you're shelled for, you're like, yeah, well, that was a poor mistake. You kind of forget again. You forget how you got there, and then that's when you slip up, because you tend to forget those, what might seem to those as like boring, monotonous. They're basically it's almost too simple. I have this argument all the time with my therapist, who I've known for like 6 years, who's got 20 years of sobriety. I was like, we argue this all the time because he agrees with me. I'm like, I guess we're not arguing, we're just talking. Is that like that one of the reasons that AA doesn't work for a lot of people, because it does come across as too simple. You have to work at it, but it's like, oh, you have to follow, like, you do these things, and then like, oh, like you can actually do this. Like, that doesn't seem real. And it's not flashy enough. Again, it's not like the sweat lodge shaman moment of fasting for 2 weeks and meditating for 7 years in a a redwood forest, and then you come out this reborn person of sobriety that that never raises their voice and never has any problems, and always ends every sentence with "be well." Like, that's just not how it works. It's a day-to-day, like, simplistic thing that just makes sense honestly, it's just a guide of how to live your life. But but if you lose sight of that and you get kind of like cocky with it, then it plays that trick. Because I even have that voice in my head, like, every few months. I don't have urges to drink, but I'll have thoughts that go through my head that say, do you really think, like, you're sober for this long and you've been able to do it and you've been successful at it and you haven't, fortunately, had to relapse? So do you think you really got a problem? And it's that devil in your brain. It's that disease of addiction that's like, but maybe you could. And then, it never affects me, obviously, but you think about it, and then your next thought is, no, this isn't reality. I know exactly what would happen. Mm-hmm. But if you veer off course, even for a moment, then you could change the whole direction of your life. Mm-hmm. And obviously that's the thing you got to keep.
The consequences are much larger in that situation. Right. But the lesson there is the truth. Is like you're saying, if you, things are going great, and the way I'm moving in the right direction, but why not just throw a big fire on this and just see if I can catapult way ahead with a 2.5-hour track workout or whatever the case is. And that's the danger. And I think that's sort of the underlying point of this whole discussion, is that stay within your boundaries. I mean, we're in a world that farms things out now. It's like, people used to clean their own gutters or trim their own trees or mow their own lawn, and more it's like, or drive their own car. And, it's like more and more society is sort of like, there's an app for that, literally. And I think that tendency is almost like, that's kind of what popped in my head when you're talking about the athlete that calls you 2 months before their Ironman and says they're lost. It's like, hey, can you just fix this for me? And the reality is, triathlon is still about work. It's about daily work, and that whether that's sticking your long run one day and then taking a day off. Taking a day off, it can be work too. Mm-hmm. And in the right places, and because it feels like that's not really what you should be doing, but you should. And if you can't get the right recovery balance, I went the other way one time where I was training. I can't remember which Ironman it was, but I was so burned out. I decided to do the race kind of late. And I think it might have been Louisville that hot year, but I was just not into it, and I was forcing it so hard. And I was like, I was writing my blog at the time, and I called it 10 days off during Ironman training or something like that. And I literally took 10 straight days off.
I remember this.
And it was like, when you talk about unbalance, man, it was like, I completely went the opposite direction. Instead of overkill, I was like, I'm so tired. I'm just going to take this time off and prove that this is the right methodology. And the whole thing was just jacked. I was overworked on one end, and then I was recovering on this side, and the whole thing was just kind of a big mess. But yeah, man, it's hard work. It's not hard. It's just like I was saying with this whole Zen thing. Just see what's going on.
But I would disagree with you in that it is hard.
Well,
because it's easy to do one great thing or quote unquote, some grandiose thing on one day versus doing a small thing consistently each and every day.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and then that's the thing. It's like most people want to go out and, like, I was having this conversation with an athlete that I just started working with, and I was like, all right, so you feel like your run has been like the biggest limiter. Tell me a bit more about that. What have you been doing? Like, what's your biggest weekly volume leading up to these Ironmans? He's like, well, I did like a track workout on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, and then I did like a short run off the bike, and then I did a long run on the weekend. I'm like, okay, so given X amount of, given X miles per hour, knowing your current speed, you probably rarely ever did over 30 miles in a week of running. Oh, well, yeah, I guess if you look at it that way, then that's probably true. Yeah, that's not enough. And so but for most people, they again, like, they want to do that great work. They want to get the icing. They just don't want to build the cake. They want to do something that's exciting that can fulfill their need for immediate response and immediate gratification and immediate justification and telling you that you've got it and that you're great and that you're fast and I can feel that, I can see it, like I am this. It is now. That's easy. That's easy. It's getting people to commit to the hard things that lead to ultimate great success, is doing the small thing each and every day, running 4, 5, 6 times a week, sometimes twice in a day. That's easy. But that's not grandiose. I don't get it, But it's so they're looking more. Everyone's obsessed with the icing and not the cake, and without the cake, the icing is nothing. It's in a bowl in the kitchen for nobody to see. With your 6-year-old, using a spatula to lick it off his finger.
But have you seen how weak a 20-minute run looks like on Garmin Connect?
Yeah, I don't believe me. I have, because I'm well, why am I even doing this? Like, I don't see. And then you look at their weekly volume, like, oh, I had no idea that I got that in.
Talk to me about that 3 miles when you're walking halfway through.
It's just, but again, so I get what you were saying, but it's a doing it each day and knowing it has a great purpose that ultimately leads you to be super, super successful in so many things with being consistent. And that is, do we have a lot of athletes that produce really well? Yes. Do we have a lot of athletes that, are, have PRs and they do great but the biggest job of a coach isn't always it's not like we have some special unknown analysis and data and calculation that we apply to every athlete. It's so 90% of it is psychological, mental, and emotional. In getting athletes to understand it's not a different way, but it's different to them way of getting out of their own way and realizing that most workouts are supposed to be uneventful. Hopefully, if they're not, then I didn't do my job correctly. I should have, not given you as much. But it's stringing it together. It's being consistent. It's putting together days and weeks and months, and then you're going to see these breakout events. It's a mindset shift. And then once you're able to get that through an athlete's head and they adopt it and they accept it and they're motivated by it and they're totally bought in, then they see results that they've never had before. And it's not because we work with some like special system of development. It's that from these super special workouts, it's the application, the distribution of those, but they mean nothing. The athletes the workouts you give an athlete mean absolutely nothing if an athlete isn't willing to do them and do the other ones correctly and being consistent with them. Because then they just become doing workouts when we want to. They don't become training, because training is on a continuum. Doing workouts is something you might do 2 to 3 times a week. Or the next level below that is working out, which is 1 or 2 times a week. You're not training if you're only working out 1 or 2 times or even 3 times a week. You're just working out. You're not training. I don't want to burst anybody's bubble, but that's just, you're just going out and honestly, you're just exercising. You're not training for a specific thing, because in order to train for a specific thing, you need to be consistent with it. And so getting athletes, trying to help them get to where they figure that out for themselves and how that looks and how that feels and how that incorporates into their life is the most difficult part. And the analysis, quote unquote, you do on an athlete the first month or 2 months. Like an athlete yesterday was like, so what have you learned about me the past month? And I was like, all right, well, let me tell you. And 95% of it had to do with them as a person, mentally and emotionally, how they deal with things and what they take on, how they see themselves. And then 5% of it was like what I see with like what they actually do. Because if you can't figure out how an athlete gets to train or doesn't train or why they don't train or what get, and then you can't make them, but you also can't help them. And you have to be willing to help them. And then on the flip side, athletes have to be able to communicate well enough to allow you to help them. And this day and age, communication is very difficult, but there are so many mediums in which you can communicate now: email, text, Skype, Facebook Messenger, phone, everything. It's always there. You just have to be able to. You just have to use it.
Yep. I guess that's what I meant by it's easy. The understanding, it's the hard part, and then once you realize what consistent training means or how it can affect you, then it's not as hard as you thought. The hard part is being consistent and
exactly. Yep.
But like you said, in your recovery, it doesn't have to be that hard. You just understand it and make a choice.
It's a hard choice.
It's a hard choice.
It's not just it's a hard choice, but you got to totally buy in. You can't just like dip your toe in the water. You have to totally buy in, because if you just want to sprinkle it here and there, it ain't gonna work.
Yeah, it's faith, man. It's complete faith in the progress or the process, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe that'll wrap it up.
Supercast
coming at you on a Monday.
Yeah, appreciate you listening. Subscribe. Hope you enjoyed it. Go back to the archives. We have 272 other episodes for your listening pleasure. You can always check out and see all the other things that we also do besides this free podcast on our website, which is crushingiron.com. We have a ton of information on there about swim analysis, our camps, coaching, training packages, blog, our team, gear, our club membership, all kinds of fun things. Check that out, peruse it, look around, and then if you have any questions at all, reach out to Mike, crushingiron@gmail.com. Or if you want to reach out to me, you can hit me up directly at c26coach@gmail.com.
Yeah. And since you mentioned it, we've had a few, we've been getting some orders lately at the store. We do have a little store on our website where you can order some C26 gear, and it helps supports the podcast, and you get to wear the logo and shine bright.
Shine bright. I like it.
All right, man. Well,
all right, dude.
Thanks for listening, everybody, and we will see you on Thursday.
See you, buddy.